call the January Inlet and Beach Protection Board regular meeting to order. Mike is out of town. Don't know about Richard. Okay. Agenda approval?
I'm sorry?
Agenda approval?
Oh. I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I can second that.
Okay. I'm going to assume that was approved unanimously. Approval of minutes. We've got the minutes of the December 7th meeting and the December 20th meeting. Anybody have any changes or corrections? The only thing I had was, I think, on the December 20th set, Brennan's name spelled with an A. Brennan Dooley. Not that, that's a big deal, but,
Those on the 20th?
yep. This is our new buddy. Do either of you have any changes or questions?
Nothing here.
Can I ask that both sets be approved? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Christie, both sets of minutes are approved. Okay, status of the beach and inlets. David and Christie, switch over to you.
I'll give a report, and then
Okay.
when I am done, if Fran wants to chime in on what I'm going to talk about additional losses, if we can give him a moment.
Sure.
So that's what I'm going to start with. He finished stitching on the information from the surveys with the transects for the information that FEMA had requested. Estimates in the engineered beach section are losses of $865,953, and full shoreline is $1,524,352. So those are larger than what we first had as estimates. He's sending the final report to FEMA. There's still no federal declaration for Matthew for North Carolina. Despite these losses in our recent survey or recent visual inspections of the beach is looking good until this morning, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like after it blows around today. The final paperwork was signed through the North Carolina Department of Public Safety with all of their going through our Matthew paperwork, and it has been sent to FEMA headquarters, so hopefully Matthew will be closed out soon. We still cross our fingers on that. You guys received a copy of the letter that was sent to the county at the request of Chair Myers. So the county, we did send our position to the county on the Deeper and Wider project, and they are supposed to get a response back to the town. We also gave comments on Oak Island's 408 review regarding the inlet. I sent the Corps another email to Brennan Dooley about the possibility of the town piggybacking on the AIWW crossing with the Ben Widener.
Yep.
And the answer is that they just started at Brown's Inlet, and they're going to have to continue to coordinate with the contractor to see if environmental windows will allow that to happen. They'll get in contact with the town when they know more.
So that's yet to be determined.
Yes. And then on the Monday night agenda of the county Board of Commissioners, there was a resolution for approving federal legislative goals for 2019 and 20, and number 4 on the resolution that they had was to support increased federal funding and program support for shoreline protection measures, including dredging and beach nourishment. And then, if Fran, if you want to say anything else about your additional work.
The volume losses were significant. I mean, there's basically more than half of the Central Reach project, the nourishment, so that they're disappointing losses. It did get a little complex where there was some additional material, as you recall from last year. There was, another 400,000 cubic yards of material that we think that was kind of additional to the Central Reach project, and that material was part of that 800,000 that left. So we are kind of hopeful that really the central reach really only lost maybe about, a 500,000 cubic yards. But so we'll have to, the numbers say what the numbers say, and we're going to report that to FEMA, and that is kind of what happened. A lot of times when we do the response offshore was a little unusual, where we usually do see some material on there, but it was not there this time. So.
Do you think it could be further out than depth of closure?
Oh, the surveyors went even farther out. They basically go out and you can kind of see where it flattens out, and there was no noticeable material, especially, but it's just difficult when you can see the transects, and then when you get 3,000 or 4,000 feet offshore, almost a mile offshore, it just flattens out, and then even like surveyor error, within an inch or two, if you calculate volume that way, then all of a sudden it just gets noisy when it's just really flat like that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't lay out in any kind of mounds. So no, we're pretty confident. The survey went out to negative 25 feet. So and we looked at that. We looked at the typical depth of closure around 12 feet. That is where you stop seeing the sloping.
Sure.
And then we went out to we looked at up to 20 feet, and then we stopped looking at it 20 feet, and we just kept seeing losses. So.
If I could pile on to the Beach and Inlet report, adding to Christie's, the county's agenda the other night.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out what was not on their agenda, and that was the acceptance of the Deeper Wider grant project. That was conspicuously absent from that agenda in my mind, especially given the fact that we were asked to give feedback and perspective
So early, yeah.
As soon as we can, early January, which we did, and but I just want to point that out. So I don't know.
And
Other than it was not on their agenda, and we've been told that we'll be privy to that.
So you haven't heard anything though why it wasn't on there, or?
But I haven't asked. So.
Okay.
Christy, you sent us the letter that was sent to the county regarding the Deeper and Wider, but you also said that there was a response about Oak Island's request.
Yeah, that was I had that in my notes and missed saying that. I was supposed to come back to. Oak Island is interested based on their response.
That was a very general
Email.
two or three line email from their manager that's told the county that they would provide further. Excuse me. It was kind of, I think it was a stopgap measure.
Yeah. They didn't want to be excluded. Okay. So Fran, your report that you submitted, can we get a copy of that just to read it?
Yes. We're finalizing. We did all the volume calcs, and now we had according to the FEMA, we'll get you that next week.
Okay.
The FEMA losses.
Could you tell if any of that went anywhere else, like out of Central Reach, maybe down towards the west, or did you notice any of that? Or?
Yeah, it looked like the entire beach, lost material. We didn't really see anywhere that it gained. So, yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it was, you had Florence, and you had Michael, and then actually with the survey, that November,
The no-name blow.
yeah, the no-name November storm also. So it was pretty rough 6 months or so. for the beach.
Yeah, today's a rough day for it too.
Today's not helping.
Yeah. There's some
Did you
big
look
waves
at
out there.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
It's standing
It's
out
turning.
there. Well, yeah, and it's standing out there by the fences, down
Yeah.
even by the
Uh-huh.
beach.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for
I
the
honestly,
wake up.
we have had standing water in our yard since, I don't know, last early last September,
Well,
end of August.
High tide's about in 15 minutes or so, so.
Yeah,
I'm hoping
it's
we'll-
churning out there.
700 block is pretty interesting right now on
Yeah.
Ocean Boulevard.
And then, we're right near, another king tide, seems like we.
Right.
they need-
Few
We're
days,
wrapping that
few
up
days
this week.
past.
Yeah, but it's pretty,
Back marsh
yeah,
is
it's
full.
pretty high, yeah.
Back marsh is full.
I had a couple of questions. The status of the Inlet modeling project,
Mhm.
where do we stand on that?
We're still working on that. Some of these other projects have kind of jumped, complicated matters. We hope to kind of have some stuff done by next month.
Okay. And the merit's still coming in May?
That's the last report we had. I'm sure that the Corps will give an update next week at the Brunswick Shoreline meeting on the 30th.
Okay.
That's for the crossing,
No, for the inlet.
for the inlet,
You
yeah.
know, the
Yeah,
sidecaster.
Sidecaster.
Remember, it was supposed to be November, and then they had supposed to go into Carolina Beach or something for, kind of like their shakedown run, I guess. I guess it didn't shake down well. Is that true?
Broke down.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
And I'll bring it up just because David knows, I bring this up at all of our agenda meetings. So we're expecting that at some point FEMA will pay for some of our losses, right?
Correct.
Are we looking at a plan for using those?
Our focus right now is to assure that the FEMA state reimbursement projects get approved. That's our
I hear you.
focus. That's what we're
That's got to be
focused on.
step one.
Got to be. If that doesn't happen,
But you can assure me that in the back of your mind, you're thinking, right, about next steps, right?
Sure, yes.
I also was wondering about if you wanted to address the proposed inlet hazard areas.
The expanding of the proposed inlet hazard areas, yes.
I think that's a bit early on. Right now, there is a proposed language to go along with that expansion, and we're going to have staff at the next Coastal Resources Commission meeting to stay abreast of that circumstance.
Do you think we'll get language before the February meeting?
I wasn't at the December meeting, so I don't know how well received or what type of guidance that the Coastal Resources Commission gave to their staff.
Okay.
I can only assume that any proposed language would come out at that meeting. The Coastal Resources Commission rulemaking process is fairly lengthy and drawn out. There will be a multitude of opportunities to engage in that process. I'm just not privy to any staff work right now that may provide that type of information.
Are you looking at, I talked to Tim and he feels like the science committee did a good job on laying out where these proposed inlet hazard areas would be, and things that would probably be unlikely would be able to change that. Maybe we can change the language, but not the actual designation of the inlet hazard areas. That's all speculation on his part. He fully says that, but he thinks that they did a good job this time in figuring that out.
The expansion on the west end, though, is huge.
I hear
I
you.
mean, it's huge.
So, in that report, it talks about the number of lots that are less than 15,000 square feet. Have you looked at what that would do to our tax base, or?
Until we have any type of proposed language, as far as in order to be able to ascertain potential impacts. It's anything along those lines is strictly speculative, and in my opinion, we gotta have something a little more finite before we start going into those type of what-if scenarios.
Who from this group has the CRC? Is that?
I
Well,
think I do.
but what we're talking about there is really planning and zoning. That's not in this committee's bailiwick.
Can you expand on that?
Well, we're talking about setbacks, we're talking about lot size, we're talking about building size. All of those are traditional planning and zoning considerations.
Okay. Let's save those. Okay, that's all I have on status of beach and inlet. Does anyone else have any other questions? Fran, did you have anything else you wanted to share or talk about? Or did you want to wait until we get down to the comprehensive long-term plan? That's our next agenda.
For the bend widener for this, I mean, I'll talk to the dredger and just remind him. I talked to him 6 weeks ago or so.
Is that Darryl?
Yeah, Daryl. Have you talked with Daryl or no?
I have.
Okay. I'll just check in with him and say that, the town is still interested in that bend widener. I'm sure, Oak Island's probably interested in it as well.
Just so y'all know who Darryl is, that's Southwind.
Okay.
That's the, I guess the program manager for them, project manager and engineer for them.
Okay.
And Southwind is actually the contract awardee on this project, and we've worked with Southwind before to coordinate what we can do and what they can do, that kind of thing. So
In the process, explain to me how that works then if both parties want that sand.
we're in uncharted waters right now, and the Corps is really driving this particular train, and beyond that, again,
Because that's
it's
that.
speculative. Again, it's speculative because we don't know.
Okay, then moving on to number 5, discussion of process timeframe components of the comprehensive long-term plan. Ron, you probably got you should have gotten the thing that Dean put together.
I didn't get the thing that Dean put together.
It's at the back.
So I started with your framework,
Right.
Vicki, and
Right,
built on your,
yeah.
give yourself credit.
He fleshed out,
Did
It's at the back of the agenda packet.
Oh, I did get that. I'm sorry.
it's this one with all the color.
I just didn't know that it was Dean's.
Yes,
Yes.
so Dean put that together, fleshed out what we had agreed on before.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about that?
So in essence, I took your framework and first I put a map up at the beginning just to break up the components, the two inlets and the beach
Yep,
sections. But then reformatted to give it a flavor of short term, what are we doing today? What does the town already do today? Longer term, what are these initiatives that we've talked about that maybe we can do to strengthen our island? And then there is this ongoing disruptive events. When those things happen, how are those folded into the regular ongoing? And I think a lot of the regular ongoing seems to be tackling these disruptive events. So I tried to put that spin on it, or that format into your framework. Then just thinking off the top of my head, what are the things that are happening today? What are the initiatives that we've talked about, and tried to drop those into either short-term, long-term, or the disruptive events sections. And then finally, I think in the appendix, I've added 2 other items that I thought could help with that would be adds to the document, I think, helpful adds.
These are the stuff that you added at the end.
Mhm. And then in some of the sections, there were items that I know are happening or things that we've talked about, but I don't know, do they drop into that section or, I thought that would be stuff we'd need to brainstorm together and together with the town management and as well as Fran and ATM, how do we want those placed? And that's as far as I went with it.
Okay. Then I guess David or Christie or?
Yeah, those are components, or brainstorm components, and it's great, start on what we need to do. I think that we probably need to back up and talk about process and time frame.
Right.
And process-wise, I think that staff is at the point now where, and also the time frame, I believe I suggested last time that we need to look at 6 months to have a deliverable document that is sufficiently evolved to present as a recommended master plan
Right.
to the commissioners. Now, what they do with it after that, is
Right.
to the commissioners. But I think that you will have fulfilled your sanction by charter to do that. So if that's, everybody's head's going up and down that 6 months is desirable. And from the staff's perspective, in terms of process, we've got to the point where it's dawned on us that there's going to be a bunch of engineering involved in that, and in coordination with ATM, those answers will come from ATM, and it's just a natural progression to have them provide a facilitator. And I've talked to Fran about this. They have that capability. We believe we have bandwidth within our existing services and budget in order to accomplish both the engineering and the facilitation in order to do that. So that said, I think that's where we need to move forward with. I do have some tweaks I want to talk to Fran about separately, but I think that the framework that you've established here with these components are all very easily addressable, in that master plan, especially with the framework that exists already, with that 09 beach management plan. So, I think we're ready to set sail there. The boat is, tied up, it's gassed up, and now we just need to cast the lines off and set sail with it. I do believe that those components that have been, identified in order to be fair to ATM and the facilitator, that they need to get a copy of these, and
Yeah, absolutely.
so that we can come back to the next board meeting, maybe get some interim guidance as far as a real tight timeline, because we said 6 months, but then I assume that we'll just hit it on our regular scheduled meeting dates and have work sessions, that kind of thing. But that's without the benefit of talking to the facilitator. So I'm pretty sure that that's what we'll do.
So we'd be looking at midsummer completion.
So when would we schedule some of these work sessions?
That's what I'm saying, is that they should be coincidental with your regular meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that'd be part of our regular monthly
Yeah.
meetings.
And-
We'd be
Okay.
working on this as a deliverable.
Okay.
And I think that what you're
And
gonna.
if we need time outside of it, then we would just maybe schedule that as a
Yeah.
workshop or a work
Yeah.
session?
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that what you're gonna find is that your regular scheduled meetings, become working on this plan. You know, we'll hit the other things, and current events, like we're talking about the status, I think that those will be quite evident. They'll become addressed as dialogue within the plan. So if that's,
Okay.
if that's acceptable to the group, that's the way we'll proceed administratively to get that done. So what I would propose is that, we've got the guts of what we need to work on, and unless you want to discuss some of the particulars or add to it, we'll use this as the initial go back for ATM, and then perhaps if they can come back to us with a suggested framework and a specific timeline to take down and be ready to go at the next meeting to do some yellow stickies on the wall and that kind of thing.
Okay, so we're looking at February then.
Yeah, I mean, Fran, if I said anything that doesn't...
No, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds great. Again, I think ATM already does a lot of this stuff and much more technical detail,
But-
whereas this, I kind of came at it from more the higher level that, hey, it's something that commissioners can grab and go through more quickly.
But I found your things, topically pertinent. And hopefully we can get that same type of input as we evolve from the board as a collective.
Okay, so then we're in agreement that we'll begin work on this at our next meeting in February?
And it sounds like that first step is
Do we need a
ATM and a
motion for this?
facilitator come back and
Yeah.
kind of give a stake in the ground of where,
Yeah.
if
Yes.
they've reviewed this, where do they think they can build on it or make changes?
Right. Okay, that's what we'll do.
So
Great.
did you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we start working on this in our next meeting.
I'll second that.
All those,
And
Yes.
I just point out that y'all have already started working.
Yes,
We-
yes.
we had a motion in our last meeting that we did our initial outline.
Right.
And then Dean took that outline and
And,
beefed it up with the yellow.
yes,
So kind of the things we've already
thank you,
talked
Dean.
about. Uh-huh.
Good job.
Okay, I'm gonna, that motion was unanimous, Christie. Okay, discussion regarding budget items for FY 19 and 20. Just let me say right off the bat, Mike has been working on maps with Christie, correct? Do
Correct.
you want to talk about that? Mike said he'd be willing to take this back next month when he's back in town. Or you can discuss it now, or?
I'll talk. We went out on the beach for a beach ride. We took the zoning officer, Rhonda Wooten, with us, and she explained areas where we have accesses that it won't work, which were very visible to see. Some of our accesses are not a straight shot, and in order for us to even, you can have those mats cut in special sections, which requires more maintenance on behalf of our maintenance staff. But you would go over vegetation, and we don't want to go over any vegetation. So basically where we got to, and he's going to meet with me again at the beginning of next week about some additional stuff, but where we were when we left each other that day was that we felt like we had enough mats to cover the areas that we currently have. He did suggest that we continue to order the 4 that we do each year as a replacement, so that if the end of the season we lose some, that we have some ready to go when we put them back out in the spring. So the budget at this point was to maintain what we've been ordering, unless I know he's had some phone calls with some of the beaches in the Outer Banks, and I know he met about the West End. So unless something else comes out of that, which I'll find out next week, that's where we left.
I would like to add to that, and I know that this item is about budget items, and what Christie has specifically addressed are town walkways.
Yes.
This is exemplary of a topic that I would hope we're able to evolve into the master plan that would provide a primer for private walkways to be able to use as they evaluate their potential mechanisms that they can use to improve their private walkways. So, I just wanted to go ahead and put a plug in for that, because I think that that's the type of thing that this plan should bring forth.
Well, and Mike also,
Because it's one thing for us to say, we got 22 walkways,
Yeah.
and we're gonna address the public walkway. But for the broader, applicability and benefit to the community, I think it's important that we provide, that type of information for the private walkways.
and my question is, he also mentioned that some of the private walkways are not well maintained at all, and that some of them are actually, people are just walking over the dune. Do we have a process in place to address that?
Yes, we do, and that really goes to some of the technical aspects of how people are allowed to construct their walkways. And one of it wasn't as evident when the beach was skinny.
Mm-hmm.
Now that it's wider and dunes are growing, it's becoming more evident how that is. Whenever someone builds a walkway according to the prescriptive, they're only allowed to put it so far out. And then when the dune builds in front of that, it's kind of hard to enforce the prescriptive of now they have to add
Sure.
dunes out there. So,
And they're proposing to extend that out 6 more feet, correct? 6 feet past the vegetation line is the new thing?
I'll defer to what you already know. I'm not privy to that, obviously, that is. But, my perspective is that we should be able to provide assistance as an option to people. Maintenance of walkways is one thing, and it's always going to be an issue, because we have the other example is where erosion takes place, and those walkways now have to be truncated or reconstructed. So,
I guess I would not.
it's a circumstance
It
that,
wasn't just the long walkway going out, but like, he was saying there's some that there's not even stairs going over the dune.
and those are old, they're old, and
Yeah.
it's a consequence of now that dune has built, decreted in front of the dune,
And most of those are what we refer to the deeded beach accesses,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one, the public beach accesses, and then you've got the beach accesses that are the developments, like, Flaming River,
Yeah.
or Marsh Walk, or Point West, that type of thing. Those typically are not the issues. The issues are the deeded beach access, and people who think that they have deeded rights to that access. Some do, some don't. It's really hard to figure out
Who
who
owns
actually
them.
really owns, and over the years, people have let other people buy in. Okay, how am I gonna get to the beach? Well, for $2,000, you can buy into this access, and then somebody takes the $2,000, it's never maintained, those are an issue.
Those are the ones.
Yeah,
I'm
and
talking
those
about.
are the ones that you're talking about, and some of those are taken care of, and some of those are not, and it's very haphazard.
Well, you can look on Google Maps and see that there's one every 4th house roughly between Coastal and almost down to me. Like every 4th house, there's a trail you can see.
And it's a big deal, that, and it's also a big deal when you're selling real estate, because to try and get to whether or not they actually have that access in their deed or not,
Mhm.
it's,
Well, and I can go back and I can match that up against the county's GIS system and see that some of those, the town owns the land, but it's a private, I guess it's like the Elizabeth Street
Mhm.
mess, but, If the town owns the land and somebody falls because there's a stair missing, who's liable for that? Just wondering.
I know that some of the particular questions he had about some of those walkways, and Rhonda addressed with him with answers of how it was addressed through their department, and that particular set of steps that you're talking about, she took pictures of to see how that she could follow up.
So anyway, we'll come back to Matt's next month because Mike will be back. Why don't we move on to plantings and fertilization? That was the one that I took. Spent a ton of time learning all about seacoast plants of the Carolinas. Our issues is that we now are planted mostly with one species during our last planting. Some of the areas are not thriving. We've had storms, inundation, lack of nutrients, foot traffic, all those are taking a toll on those plants. Our goal is to, what we talked about before was a wider diversity of plants, creates a more successful habitat, and also reduces the risk of using a single species. Plants selected, this is kind of what I'm thinking, that they should maximize dune growth by trapping the sand and stabilizing the dune with their roots and rhizomes. That the plant should be able to reproduce and or propagate without our intervention. To me, that's something we want to see this stuff grow on its own and go and not need to be planted. That shuts out American beach grass, which is an inexpensive plant that, David, correct me if I'm wrong, we have used that before, and I know that Steve is proposing that for the Renourishment Association plantings. My only concern about that is that it does not reproduce or seed south of Hatteras. It can spread by rhizomes, but the concern I have is that I think we're better off with COs, just because from what I've read, the dividing line is kind of Hatteras, and north of Hatteras, American beach grass is the way to go, and south it's COs. So that's something to consider. And that we should continue, our sand fences should be installed and maintained, which I know that the town already does. I just think we need to continue doing that. And then we had talked about what we wanted to do is when we present this stuff to the commissioners, we wanted to present this as a menu option, where they can choose A and B or A, B, and C or whatever. We can prioritize those and what we think would be most effective, bang for the buck type of a thing, but that we kind of agree that that was not, we are not the budgeters, they are the budgeters.
And we can give them our best
but
recommendations.
here are our best recommendations. And I want to talk with Steve before we, or whoever, can we say it's Steve? I mean, does that need to go out for bid, David?
As far as asking opinions and advice on what type of, we're not paying for that type of service. So, I mean.
Now, he's scheduled to come and speak with us, right? We talked about that.
We talked about
We talked about
scheduling,
having
but
him come, but he's not on the schedule yet. We're talking about having him come to a future workshop. And then you guys also going out to a field trip.
Right. So anyway, before we decide on exactly what we think our menu options should be, things I've come up with would be, one option would be to establish a regular fertilization plan, and that the Renourishment Association will be fertilizing this spring, but the town should plan and budget for next spring.
fall. Well, I thought we were going to do a fall fertilization too, or talked about that.
We talked about that in it, but actually my research says that for our plants, it's probably best to do it in the spring.
spring.
When they're dormant, actually.
Okay.
Before.
Like early spring.
Early spring. If you wait any longer, then you're going to be fertilizing the competitive annuals.
Species. Yeah,
that are very competitive with our perennials that we're loving, our COs.
okay.
So, and the trick is to find the time that you want to fertilize before they wake up while they're still dormant, but you don't want to fertilize so far prior that the nutrients get washed by the rain down past the root zone.
Mhm.
So, I think it's an art there.
So I'm hearing short-term stuff and I'm hearing longer-term stuff. The longer-term is gonna fold into the master plan, is that your vision?
Yes.
But now you're having a conversation about what might need to go into next year's budget? Are these things you're
These are things that I think would
proposing?
Holden, I don't want to propose it until we talk with Steve and get a little bit more advice
Okay.
from him personally. But these are things that I would recommend would go into the budget for the coming year.
Steve's pretty accessible to talk to. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
But, so yes on both.
So there's already, I assume, money in the budget for vegetation activities today, right?
There's 15,000 or something, is that right?
I think it's more than that.
It may be-
I
I think I may be thinking fencing.
Yeah, I think you're thinking fencing. I think it's 70,000 for vegetation and 15,000 for fencing.
15, did you say?
15 for fencing, 70 for vegetation.
I think
Okay.
that's correct. I've got that budget on my desk. I didn't bring it in here today.
And then the Holden Beach Renourishment Association, which are you familiar with that?
No.
It's an old organization that is wrapping up because the town basically took over the duties that they were doing. They used to do the planting and all that stuff on their own. They collected donations from private citizens and did the work themselves for sand fencing, plantings, that kind of thing. Technically, David is the president.
Not
So how is this
anymore, I
process?
resigned.
Okay.
So
Who's
how
the
does this
president
process
now?
work? You're making recommendations to the town manager and,
No, the board of the Renourishment Association has been trying to spend the remaining $40,000 that's in their budget to wrap it up, close out the association and be done, okay? So we came up with a plan of how we would spend that. It was a combination of fertilization and plantings. So it was supposed to be, we originally talked about doing it last fall, but with the storms and all that kind of stuff, it just didn't happen. So we,
It's good they did.
yes, moved it to this spring, and so that's kind of ramping up right now. I can give you the latest memo if you want to read what the proposals are and what the plan is. But it would be fertilization from inlet to inlet and planting of American beach grass. That's the goal. That's going to be voted on. David, you read the memo too. By Friday, we had to have our input in, right?
Yeah, it looks like to me that's gonna happen. They'll wrap up and then the town can step forward based on what they decide to do.
And is Steve helping?
Steve is on the board of that, and he's the one who put the proposal together, but he's not voting because that'd be a conflict of interest.
Because he does the work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
But the town, that notwithstanding, the town's not gonna hold off on waiting on the Renourishment Association to figure out what they want to do.
Right.
I mean, it's coming up on fertilization time, and if that doesn't happen, we're gonna have to execute unilaterally from the town's perspective.
anyway, so then I can email you guys this is my notes on this. We need to be inspecting our plants midsummer to determine the need for fertilization the following spring, when the fertilizer should be applied, So fertilization plan, a regular ongoing fertilization plan would be option one. Another option is to increase our planting diversity within the already planted areas. So like in addition to the sea oats, add bitter panicum, sea elder, or salt meadow cordgrass. Another option would be to repair our damaged areas, which the town does some of this, but I didn't know if we needed to actually program this or,
Supplemental.
well, whatever,
Mhm.
make sure it happens. It would be within reason, include new plantings from areas experience frequent washovers. I wanted to exclude new plantings from areas that are experiencing the frequent washovers and inundation, as it's so hard for those new transplants, to survive.
Mhm.
So there may be areas out on the east end that you can't put any more out there.
Mhm.
We would need to be judgmental about where we put it and careful.
They have the best opportunity for success,
Yeah.
right?
to make sure that we replant the COs when we lose them, and replace our sand fences and ropes, and then to add other plants to increase diversity. Another option would be to to create a test garden. I'm calling it a test garden for new species to determine their viability and robustness here on our beach. For example, seashore dropseed seed is a great plant for building dunes, but it's usually further south. However, Holden Beach is a sort of microclimate. I think it has to do with the shape of our beach. We tend to be a little bit drier than a lot of the other areas, and I think it's because of the way that storms come. They hit the cold water of the ocean when they're moving to the northeast and drop their rain, and we end up kind of sometimes in a rain shadow. So,
I guess I'm getting lost on short-term, long-term.
Okay.
And that sounds like a longer-term item that we would put in the master plan and propose it, this kind of thing, versus we need that on the radar for the budget this year.
I want to just throw out a menu and let them decide.
Are you going to have costs on that?
I want to talk to them about costs.
And then that would go to the commissioners when they start their budgetary conversations?
Right.
Okay.
And
Okay,
then,
I'm just trying to get a feel for what.
yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I hear your
Whereas
different
some of them-
options, but there could be different combinations of that make sense.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then the others would be, we've talked about this before, to plant additional areas. Either plant additional areas to the west of Central Reach, like track west with the migration of sand from Central Reach, but some areas may be limited. We'd have to check with Rhonda. Also the fill-in areas. There are plantings between where we planted with the tractor before and the actual dune, between the fences, areas that were not previously planted due to like turtle nests, that kind of thing.
Can you get that to Christie and get us a copy of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like it will need some prioritization as well. Which ones
Yes.
do you, or the team, which ones does the board think are the most important and, will
My thought
reap
is
the
that-
highest benefits initially?
When we give that to the BOC, we should indicate what we think are the best choices.
How soon does that need to be done?
We're not gonna approve their budget until, after Memorial Day.
No, well,
Whoa.
whoa, we
Let
had
me
to back up.
stop. Okay. Most of what you're talking about, Vicki, needs to be addressed as part of a holistic view in the master plan.
Agreed.
We're not going to be able to go out there and evaluate the efficacy of different plants without having some type of further dialogue and gathering of information to include vendors and costs and that type of thing. We have no idea what different species of plants, and that's not going to be able to happen in time to go into the budget. It may be able to to do some, what I call bubble budgeting, and take into consideration during the fiscal year, but I would see that as part of policy statements in the master plan to investigate, the appropriate mix of plants and to bring that forward. But just to say that you're going to pin a price tag on those types of things for the upcoming budget, I just don't see that's realistic. Okay? I think that I really hesitate to discard American beachgrass out of hand as a short-term option, and we may decide. I mean, that's a mechanically intense process, but I would hesitate just to cast that out without walking around that one a couple of times. And I'm not being a wet blanket here, I'm just trying to be a practical application of the short term and the long term. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and a lot of that really needs to be formatted in the context of appending it into that master plan. But yeah, we need some budget numbers, for the upcoming budget. But we're not gonna be able to get,
All that.
all that in, we're not gonna be able to shoot on that.
I
Because
totally
we're,
agree.
we're drafting,
Yeah.
we're drafting the budget today. I mean, you know, we're working on stuff and we're working with what we've got, based on, past history.
Okay, but, and I completely understand what you're saying, but don't we need to give our input to the commissioners, and then they would, since it's really their budget, you draft, you bring one, and then they tweak it?
They do tweak it, but I have to have numbers to put into the B part budget to give for them to be able to put together the draft budget to go to the commissioners.
Yes.
So it would come to me, and the department head's budget has to be in well over a month before the draft budget is put together. So we don't really have until Memorial Day, especially
Right.
since their draft is due at the first part of April, I think, this year.
No, I hear you, and that's why we talked about last time we wanted to do this now. We started in January. Well, actually, we started in December to put that together. Okay, well, to wrap up plantings, I'll also email you, send this to Christine, and she can email out to you. It's, I've kind of got a little chart here of our, of the plants.
Can I interject one moment, to point out that it might be helpful for you guys? There is an actual workshop up at Surf City, I want to say the 9th of March, it's a Saturday. Check me on that, we got an email here recently. I'll be glad to forward it on to you guys.
Yeah.
I think that I might suggest you may be interested in attending that on your own. It's a Saturday, 1 to 3.
And it's about beach
It's
plantings.
dune vegetation is the thing. It's by Spencer Rogers is the guest speaker. He's the guy that with David Nash, used to be the Brunswick County Soil and Water Conservation District guy that wrote the dune book through Sea Grant and NC State. So that's probably worth a day trip for some of you to go up there. I'm not going to it. I've seen that Spencer's dune vegetation thing a number of times and would offer. They are requesting registration. There's not a charge for it, but I think that that we Holden Beach may be able to accomplish a number of things. One, it's a great networking opportunity with others of like minds. Two, of course, the subject matter is very relevant to what this group is doing. And two, Surf City took a beating up there, and it's probably a good example of what happens when you don't have a nourished beach and a formal program of nourishment, planting, that kind of thing. Anyway, I just offer that up. We'll circle back to you and get that information. If you
Okay.
So, just to follow up, if we wanted to send some additional recommendations to the Board of Commissioners in addition to what is already in the budget, how would we work that through to get those numbers and make those recommendations? I mean, if we wanted to do more than what's existing in the budget,
Yeah.
would we work with, Steve Mercer to get an idea, how much something might cost, or
That would be my thought.
what's that?
That's what I would think. It wouldn't be a bid, but it'd be an estimate.
Yeah, just a ballpark.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Okay, anything else on plans? Resolution?
Comes with one thing. I just found out about this yesterday. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation just put out a grant for resilience. And it's nationwide.
Oh, resilience. I thought you said
Bazillions of
Brazilian.
dollars.
No, resilience.
Resilience.
Sorry.
Okay,
It's
fine.
a resilience thing. And it's nationwide. And but the one thing that they said for the East Coast, they said one of the grants they're looking at is mostly for municipalities, big groups. And one of the items they mentioned was dune restoration. It looked like it's a pretty quick the grant process, and I think it's very competitive, and I think if you don't have something, like you're helping out bird habitat or something endangered, or you're helping with resilience and flooding somewhere, I don't know, it's maybe just something you could look into. I'm just trying to think myself of something that will win.
So that gets me thinking about the UNCW, and one of the items that OSCU had proposed was a dune survey of vegetation. Evidently, there's some sort of software that they can fly a drone and take pictures and tell you what kind of vegetation you have and that sort of thing, but maybe that could tie in with that. You know,
Yeah, I think
if we were to do a survey, use UNCW to do a survey and then circle the wagons and, between ourselves.
It's just an idea, and I maybe, when the board, maybe reads through it, and they, or even David or Christie or anybody, get some ideas, and just try to think some ideas. They are usually pretty competitive, and they are usually like big, like they want large scale, and they want kind of something that they
Bang
can,
for their buck.
yeah, they want some bang for their buck. They want something that they can kind of, put out there in their
Maybe that's something
PR.
Brunswick County would want to get involved
Yeah,
with.
I don't
do
know.
Multiple
What's-
islands kind of
Because
thing.
What was it again,
The
Brad?
National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, NFWF. And they just came out. But I think that the due date is February 19th, unfortunately. It's a
Okay.
quick
Well,
turnaround.
What we'll do is we'll look through it and gather it up and send it over to you, but,
We got birds and turtles.
Yeah. And then
We
if
got
you
birds
can,
and
anything you
turtles.
can try to, and then kind of reducing flooding in the backside, So there's some ways you can do it, but they are competitive, and
Meaning everybody's going after it?
yeah, the entire nation. So because there was one last year for living shorelines, and I went in with a local group that we went in for it, and we didn't get it, and out of the 100 submissions, only gave about 10 or 12 won, so it's pretty low, but it's still something to look at. Grant money.
And they might be, again, back to UNCW, they might, think that's positive,
Yeah.
that it's tied in with the
Yeah,
university.
yeah, they
system as
might
well.
even do that themselves.
Whereas, yeah, we might do it here on Holden initially,
Yeah.
but once UNCW's learned how to do it,
Yeah, I
They
think
can take it
universities
further.
can actually apply for the grant as well. So, yeah.
Okay, back to our item, our budget items that we've discussed. We talked about keep off the dune signs, replacing those that have been lost over time. The UNCW collaboration.
so on that front, we haven't talked about when we can meet with. I think Christie was gonna take the action to go off and try to find a date. What I did was I took his mail note, basically, his email, and I haven't contacted him about this, but he kind of spelled out, here's what I think it would cost. And so then I took the 4 items. I don't know if I can hand this out, or is that allowed? I printed out a couple of copies.
Is that okay?
Yep.
So if you want to pass those down.
just realize that we're talking about things that aren't in agenda packages, but
I had it in there under,
Well,
discussion of budget items, UNCW collaboration.
this isn't in there.
okay, we can hold off on it then. Because I haven't, what I tried to do was say, okay, how, if they were gonna do this work short term, what would it cost us approximately? If we had, if two weeks of professor time, 1 semester of student time, they have to go buy the equipment. Here's a rough estimate of what we think it would cost, each of those items. And then also longer term, once they've done
Yeah.
the upfront, if we were to call that, the dune vegetation survey, if they did that twice a year, here's how much it would cost. If they updated it twice a year versus the other 3 items are more, if we had a major event and we wanted them to come in and do those analyses again, how much would it cost? And I have a grand total for all 4 items, and then I have a number for each of the items. So again, it gets back to, our team hasn't talked about, yeah, we want, because he hasn't come and presented yet, yeah, let's have him go after 1 and 2, or that sort of thing. We haven't had those conversations, but if you did want to put something in the budget, just,
Yeah,
you know, a swag of,
yeah.
okay, a UNC engagement, we think it might be of this much approximately.
Yeah.
So,
Just curious, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chrissy, you go first.
you go first.
Okay. It's kind of segue a little bit, but a couple of years ago, my time frame perspective is crazy, but not very long ago, there was a test garden
Yes.
down in front of Dunescape. And my understanding that was Steve Mercer in conjunction with UNCW. Now, I may be wrong about that, it may have been NC State. It was Steve Mercer.
UNCW.
I'd be curious as to what, I don't remember ever seeing what the results of that test garden produced. I can tell you from physically seeing it, it didn't look very positive to me, walking by it all summer long.
There's
So-
a mycorrhizae fungus, right?
What's that?
Mycorrhizae fungus
Yeah,
that he was comparing planting the sea oats with mycorrhizae as opposed to not. Is that correct,
Okay.
David? Is that
Okay.
right? And looking at the results of that, but they did have a lot of inundation, I think.
They did have inundation, but he did, I believe, come and give a report to the Board of Commissioners at
He
the
did.
time.
He did.
I can't hear what you said.
He gave a report. He
Okay.
came back afterwards and reported.
Okay, I wasn't that involved at that point, so I didn't see that.
Wasn't he a doctoral student or something?
I think
And
so.
this was the subject of his
Thesis.
Thesis.
So he was, I don't know that he got great results just because of the inundation.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
think
it
what he did at the BOC meeting was to give results of what was not inundated at our east end, but also compare some results that he had at other beaches in the area. And then he gave an overall report to the BOC. So it's
Okay.
probably in some minutes from
Somewhere.
around the 2014-15
Okay.
timeframe.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, it was positive, right? Because I'm pretty sure that is now standard best practice.
Two comments on it. The area that they planted, part of it got overwashed, and so it messed up the results. But the area that didn't get overwashed, the science behind the uptake of the nutrients was favorable. Those
There was like
results-
one corner.
Those
that dropped.
results were favorable.
Yeah.
And then, ultimately, what I look at was, well, the COs grew and now there's a small dune there. So over time, that's what I
Yeah.
look at. And even the place that suffered because of inundation over a couple of 3 years, those plants, they held in there and grew, and then a dune grew up behind it. There's actually a small dune
There
field
is.
out there. Now, beyond that, we haven't done, any assessment on it other than going.
And I will say that Dunescape has hired Steve many, many years in a row privately to come out and help them. All the neighbors, we all get out there and we plant and we fertilize and we water, and he kind of does it in trade so he can harvest seeds. So it is another reason why that dune system's so strong down there.
But the back side of that research, as Vicki stated, is that that type of fertilizer mix has become best practice.
What I was gonna say is that I did follow up. It took a while of going back and forth because he's trying to coordinate with another professor, and he just got back to me yesterday, and it looks like there were 3 dates that they had available, and deconflicting the room here and staff schedules, that the best date that we have is the 13th, Wednesday the 13th of February, and I have not yet had a chance to check with Fran yet to see if they could even be here, but the staff's recommendation is that you hold your regular, that'll be a special meeting because it's a different day, but that'd be your meeting to cover the long-term and his presentation, and you would not hold a meeting at the end of the month.
if schedules can be accommodated. I don't know what you guys' schedules are, and I don't know what Fran's is.
I just got it yesterday, so
Okay, so you're going to let us know then? Is that what you're,
I think you guys need to decide if you can meet on the 13th first because you would need to,
I mean, y'all got schedules, you know, so we would need to poll you guys and then, and get Fran's take on it. You gotta remember, there's two guys that aren't here today on your board.
Right.
I might be able to make a very late meeting that day, but I am away.
they can only do morning, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that?
I think they
Morning.
can only do
They only
morning.
I can't.
Ideally in the morning from 10 to 12 is what it says.
okay, then, how about, can you send an email, or I can, but I think you would probably rather send an email to everybody and ask them about their availability? Is that how you want to handle it?
I can do that.
Our regularly scheduled meeting is the 21st, correct? Yeah. Third.
Yeah, I've got that down in there somewhere. Yeah,
No, I'm sorry, it's the 28th, the fourth Thursday. It's the 28th.
okay.
So again, not having met with the professor, this was just my attempt. I kind of was under the impression we needed to give rough swags for the budget if we wanted to put something, you know, if David and Christie wanted to put something in to elevate at this point.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know that we're ready for that yet.
And the last sentence in his email also says, we've also identified some internal UNCW community partnership grant opportunities that we'd like to share with you. So I think
There
that
was
was
no other day but the 13th that worked with all the schedules, huh?
correct.
Okay. We'll see what everybody else has got, but if
Yeah.
you miss it, it'll be recorded.
Yeah.
So was there anything else on the UNCW collaboration you want to talk about?
Nope, that's all I had at this point.
We'd also talked about additional monitoring, especially for the West End and the Shalot Inlet. Was that on your list, David? Okay.
That was the increased ATM's transects down at the,
The number of survey transects and the corresponding engineering analysis that will go with that. So we've got that covered.
Okay. Was there anything else that was needed to be added to that list?
No.
That's plenty. Okay.
opportunities.
Moving on to our Inlet and Beach Protection Board announcements. We're pending on our February meeting. At some point, we also want to schedule Steve Mercer to come in and speak. Correct?
Correct.
The Brunswick County meeting will be this coming Wednesday, the 30th, at 10 a.m. in Olivia. Do we need to do a quorum notice for that? Do you guys plan to attend?
I will try. to.
Shoreline Protection, Brunswick County Shoreline Protection. I'll be there. Last time we had a quorum, I just, that's at your discretion.
If I don't hear Rhonda saying she's going, then I don't know that we have a quorum of this board. So until I know that we have a quorum, I won't be able to send
I won't be
anything
able
out.
to go that day,
Okay,
so.
so if Mike goes, then we would, okay.
So do you think the deepening and widening topic will be talked about quite a bit there? Given that it's Brunswick County?
I don't know, but I'm sure it can be raised.
Yeah, that would be great. What time's that meeting at?
Do
10 a.m.
we have to give advance
10.
notice or make the request so that they invite the appropriate people from the Army Corps of Engineers or?
The Army Corps will be there, but they
They're
already
typically-
have their set agenda, so it would just be kind of under any opening up for
Open
comments that they want.
Okay,
comments.
okay, so we can ask what's the
Mhm.
status and did you receive something
Mhm.
formally from Oak Island yet and that sort of thing?
That's not a core thing, right?
It's a
It's
county
state
thing.
grant in the
State
county.
grant, county thing.
Oh, but,
It's a weird one.
good point.
We all got the calendar.
But it is the county people.
There you go.
Well, let's talk about, that it's not a core thing. It is a core thing, because the deeper and wider project is going to require permitting, and will in some aspects supplant the Corps' existing federal authorization. So the
In that
forum,
respect, it is the core
the
thing.
forum is totally appropriate to raise the discussion.
Okay, we all got the calendar from Christie with the shoreline organization stuff? Correct. I just want to make sure everybody got that. You all got a copy of the deeper and wider. We need to move on to a consensus short report to the Board of Commissioners. There's nothing. Just a second. Did I already give you that? Okay, I'm drowning in papers here.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, here's the draft, our same thing, you guys will modify this as we go along. The Inlet and Beach Protection Board met January 24th, and the following issues and topics were addressed. Status of beach and inlets. Staff provided an overview of conditions and issues relative to the beach strand and inlets. The board was updated on the new proposed inlet hazard area modification and will monitor the situation. We can take that out. We can talk about, what else would you like?
Fran gave a status of the report, the hurricane reports, the storm damage reports for FEMA. He gave a status on his modeling work, or the modeling work, his team's modeling work.
Okay?
Did we say deepening and widening? Did we talk about that topic?
We said the letter was sent to the county, and the county said they'd get a response.
Letter was sent to the county and that it was not brought up at the January county meeting.
We will bring it up at the Brunswick,
Plan to bring it up at the meeting on the 30th?
I assume David or Christie would bring it up.
I'm usually the one that has to ask the hard questions.
Thank you, David.
Okay, so I wanted to add in there, the ATM gave a status update on the hurricane damages and an update on the inlet modeling. A letter was sent to the county regarding deeper and wider. It was not brought up on the county's monthly agenda. We will bring it up at the Brunswick County Shoreline Protection.
Meeting on the
Meeting.
30th.
Let's get that there, that got mixed up. Comprehensive long-term plan. A working framework for the long-term plan was discussed and details were added to last month's outline. The plan will address each unique section of the beach: Lockwood Inlet, Eastern Reach, Central Reach, Western Reach, and Shallow Inlet. ATM will be working with us to help facilitate the report. Should we say we anticipate a 6-month work
A
period?
draft, a final draft.
I think you're okay with go ahead and put a peg down and, tell the commissioners that's what you're aiming for.
Okay. Budget items for 1920, board members discuss projects and items they would like to see included in the upcoming budget. Plantings and fertilization options were discussed. Mats will be covered next month. replacement of signs, collaboration with UNCW, and other items are still under discussion as recommendations. Meetings. Members of the board plan to attend the Brunswick County Shoreline Protection Meeting January 30th. And that's all I have. What else would you guys like to add? We good?
I think we're good. I
Okay.
make a motion to approve the short report. I do have another question, but I don't think it needs to go in that report.
I have nothing else.
Did you want to second that?
Oh, I second
The short consensus report to the board was approved as amended. Public comment.
I have a lot of questions coming from various people in my neighborhood, and this isn't gonna, so this is relevant. When people talk about Charlotte Inlet, West, Central, East, it would help if you put addresses or some reference for what it covers. I can't tell you the number of people who are coming to me at times saying, well, where are these different sections and where are we? So it would really help when you put things out that you make these references, that we start to have it defined. And
That's a good
easiest.
ad. I only roughly did that,
Yeah.
and I
No,
think
that's
of
fine.
ATM's reports where we talk, okay, transit this, transit this, transit
Addresses
that.
are going to be
We should have
easiest
both
for
of
our
those,
citizens.
both of those references.
And then we just need to stick to it. Yeah, not let it wobble, because people
Right,
will
right.
get
And
into
that's
their
driven by
head.
where is central reach, really?
Yeah.
You know, what's the FEMA?
Right, well, but
Project.
even in this figure, the east end is maybe a little bit,
Yes.
the delineation.
That
is
was
a
me
little bit-
just trying to
Yeah.
roughly say, this is, I'm thinking,
I
we
think
need
it's
something
appropriate.
like this.
I'm just asking that at some near time point,
We define what the
define it,
addresses
where does
are.
it start and where does it
Right,
end?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be similar to almost the inlet hazard areas.
Could be, could be.
That's what I have down on my notes, is should we use that as our defining, but I don't know how that corresponds.
Whatever you think is
to-
appropriate, but again, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and for the people that aren't tuned in with all this, the details, you know, much, much less than even the commissioners, you know, they need something just, okay, my house is on this side, so I'm in this section. They want to read about their own areas.
That's right.
And that's an easy do.
Yes.
I mean, that's, yeah, Transect 37 does, I do the same. Where is that?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so we can do that easily.
Yeah.
I think the important thing is that we keep in mind how each section is managed, because they're managed differently. And that's what we need to key off of. Okay. Is there anything else?
Anything else?
No, oh no, that was,
Mike?
I have a quick question. If this is back to the CRC discussion and what they're, you know, the report that came out, what they're proposing. I totally understand what you're saying about it being planning and zoning and size of lots and setbacks, that kind of thing. But as the inlet hazard area expands, it also affects where we can place sand.
We don't know that.
Okay. It may, if you read the document as it sits today, it could affect where we place sand. So I think that's a concern for, I think that's a concern for everyone.
That was something we failed to put in our letter, isn't it? Do we need to, can we go back to that item? Is that something we should have mentioned in?
I was just,
Oh, I put that we discussed it.
Okay, okay.
The board was updated on the new proposed inlet
Okay,
hazard
yes,
area
you got it.
modifications, and we'll monitor the situation.
You know, there always is.
yeah, that's close enough. Okay. Okay.
Was there any other public comments? Any comments from anybody else? Okay, then we can, make a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
We're adjourned.